So hello again, welcome again to DLFin channel. I am Shashikant Iyengar, the host today. I am a DLFin premium member and also volunteer. And for all those watching this program, this is not a medical or nutrition advice. It's just sharing of information. People are requested to take the guidance of the doctor and a low-carb nutritionist for any change. Also, there are no financials attached to this session. All are free of cost to disseminate genuine information. DLFin is a community platform for low carbers. It's a platform for those suffering from diabetes, obesity, PCOS, and other metabolic syndrome. DLFin has over 250 success stories, and DLFin also has over 1,200 low carb recipes, which are adapted to India. DLife was developed by Aup Singh, who is an engineer from IIT. Recently, Aup Singh and DLife has been recognized and awarded as icons of India by a leading magazine called Outlook magazine. And sometime back, DLife has also launched a diploma in low carb nutrition, and which others can take benefit of. So, Dr. Ken Berry, welcome to India, welcome to DLife platform.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you.
So, Dr. Ken Berry is a practicing board-certified physician, an Amazon best-selling author, and a passionate advocate of health on his YouTube channel. And he has over 1 million subscribers. And along with his online presence, he is also active in the Keto Community. He's been practicing medicine at the Berry Clinic since 2003. Dr. Berry is known for his direct, no-nonsense approach to health and wellness. After signing the Victory Belt Publishing House this year, Dr. Berry has released the second edition of his best-selling book known as Lies My Doctor Told Me. He is also in the process of writing a second book called Proper Human Diet. He takes pride in working with the real people of the world in continuing his mission to bring an end to obesity, type 2 diabetes epidemic, along with bringing awareness to such issues such as thyroid health and hormone optimization. He is very well known in the social media like Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, as well as various other social media platforms. So, Dr. Ken Berry, welcome again.
Thank you so much.
So, Doctor, please tell us about your background. How come you came into this low carb nutrition field suddenly? Have you personally encountered any health issue which you overcome with low carb keto?
Yeah, so I've been practicing family medicine for over 20 years. And during the first few years, probably the first decade of my practice, I was completely ignorant of proper human nutrition and with various facts, such as you can reverse type 2 diabetes, you can reverse fatty liver, you can reverse obesity permanently and deliciously. I was ignorant of those facts. And it was only when I started to gain weight and I started to become pre-diabetic that I really started to look into these matters. And at my heaviest, I was morbidly obese. I weighed 297 pounds and I was thoroughly pre-diabetic. I had an HbA1c of 6.2. So it was at that point when I was eating the American Diabetes Association diet and following their guidelines, but I continued to get fatter and more diabetic, that I said, something's wrong. There's a problem here with the advice that I've been giving my patients. And so in the journey of discovering how to reverse my own obesity and my own pre-diabetes, and I'm sure I had fatty liver, I had a whole host of other medical complaints. And so in the process of reversing that, I kind of stumbled on the low carb, ketogenic, carnivore way of eating. And then with subsequent research into archaeology, paleoanthropology, I have deduced that a low carb diet is in fact proper human diet. That is the way every human on the planet should eat. Now, some of us, depending on our DNA, our genetics, when we eat too many carbohydrates, we'll just get fat, right? And then others of us, we don't necessarily become obese when we eat too many carbohydrates. We'll still stay relatively lean and slender, but we'll develop fatty liver and we'll develop type 2 diabetes and we'll develop heart disease, even though we never became obese. And I think this is very closely tied with your genetic background. Some people on the planet are very prone to becoming obese. People with Caucasian DNA, if you have a high percentage of Neanderthal DNA in your heritage, if you're from the very northern or southernmost latitudes, then you'll tend to become obese very quickly if you eat too many carbohydrates. People around the equator, Asians and Indian origin, very often they won't become obese. It's very hard for them to become obese, but they'll have that little belly pooch, right? They'll be slender, but they'll have that little belly. And that's a sign that you are metabolically unwell, even though you're very slender otherwise. And it's well known, if you actually look at the lab data, that in the Indian population and the Asian population, there's a very, very high incidence of prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and fatty liver, even in people who look relatively thin. And so very often on Twitter, I'll have people say, well, what about the Indians? They eat a very high carb diet. Or what about the Asians? They eat a very high carb diet, but they're still skinny. And I think many people mistakenly equate being slender with being metabolically healthy. And that is not always the case, as I'm sure you're well aware. You can be very metabolically unhealthy and still be relatively slender.
I think it is just like my own case. I was not obese. My BMI was in the range. However, I had pot belly and fatty liver. So I think basically we have what is called as a lower personal fat threshold. And
Yes.
we are not able to really store fat in our adipocytes. So we keep storing fat on all the organs. And then we become diabetic. Most of us are pre-diabetic, of course. And sadly, since we are not very bulky or very obese, unlike how we see in Western population, people
Yes.
mistakenly believe that we are very healthy. And I've seen a lot of slim people having very high triglyceride, which is just
Absolutely.
a direct indicator of the overflowing fat storage in our body. I think it's just horrible. And as you rightly say, yeah, each one of us are genetically predetermined for a different disease. Like, if along with diabetes, I suffer a lot of bone and joint disorder like osteoarthritis, frozen knee, tendonitis. However, my coronary calcium artery score is 0, CT scan is just 0. So some other people may tend to develop, let us say, hypertension. Someone will develop atherosclerosis. Maybe someone will develop nephropathy, neuropathy. So I think it varies even in India.
Yes.
Someone with diabetes will have hypertension associated. In fact, my blood pressure is very low. It's on the lower side instead of having diabetes or IR. So this is just, I think it just varies from individual to individual. So not only abroad, but even in India. So I think it's something, the sooner we realize that we are insulin resistant and we can get diabetes, or maybe not diabetes, maybe just plain hypertension. In fact, we have seen cases where some individuals develop hypertension, resistant hypertension, 3 or 4 pills, and blood sugar is not very high. In fact, I will not even classify it as just touching pre-diabetes, not even full-blown diabetes. However, severe insulin, because I've seen massive postprandial insulin of 175 and fasting insulin of around 30, and the person is not too obese also, and having 4 pills. So this is some
and I think that's a very important point to make. We focus on the blood sugar level, and then if a doctor's a little more educated, they focus on the HbA1c, which is also very important. I agree, but 2 tests that could be checked that would immediately uncover the insulin resistance, as you say, or as I like to call it, hyperinsulinemia, because that's what so many people suffer from, is to get a test called a C-peptide checked, or as you spoke of, a fasting insulin. And so you might have a completely normal blood sugar and maybe even a normal HbA1c, but you have the hypertension and you have the fatty liver, and you're like, I don't understand what's going on. But when you check a C-peptide and a fasting insulin and you find out that both of those are very elevated, then immediately you understand, oh, I'm producing way too much insulin. And that's what's causing my high blood pressure. That's what's causing my fatty liver. But wait, why am I making so much insulin? it invariably comes back to the fact that you're eating far too many carbohydrates in your daily diet.
So I think this is an education which needs to be, spread wide and far, that we need to start measuring insulin, because over here, people do not know what to do with insulin measurement. Even if we measure, what to do with it. It is
Yes.
generally seen as something which is required only in studies or maybe for some academic purpose. So the practical purpose is not seen. So Doc,
Yep.
now coming to your very, very interesting book and very bold topic, lies my doctor told me.
Yes.
So it's quite a bold topic, and this book has been, I think you're coming out with the second edition now. So can we just
Yes.
discuss some of the key lies which you think are very, very critical for Indians to know, from our perspective,
Yep.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And so I meant for the title of the book to be very bold, to be perhaps shocking, because here's why. If you're a taxi driver or you're an Uber driver, if they say, hey, you know what, you should eat a low carbohydrate diet, then they're not an expert in any way. They don't have a fiduciary relationship to you as a healthcare provider, right? So you can just laugh at them or you can take their advice or whatever. But when your doctor tells you, oh, you should eat lots of whole grains and lots of fruits and make fruit juice smoothies, and right, when your doctor tells you that, that's a different relationship. And that's why I titled the book as I did, is because it's worse when your doctor gives you bad nutrition advice than it is when your carpenter or your hairdresser or your Uber driver, when they give you bad nutrition advice. So it doesn't matter because they're not an expert. But when you hold yourself up to be an expert in the care and feeding of the human species, and yet you're giving bad nutrition advice, I think that's more than just giving bad advice. I think that becomes at that point a lie, because you should know better. It's your job to know better. And you're promoting yourself as being this very intelligent, very well-educated person about human health and nutrition, and you're giving bad advice. That's why I think it rises to the level of a lie, or it's a legal misrepresentation, because you're misleading this patient of yours, and there's going to be disastrous health outcomes because of your bad advice. And that's why I titled the book that way. I think for Indians, probably the worst advice that a doctor can give you is to eat lots of fruit and to eat lots of whole grains, right? Because as we said earlier, the average Indian citizen, they're not going to become obese if they have 7 servings of fruit a day and 7 to 11 servings of whole grains a day, like many of the governmental authorities would tell you to do. Eat lots of rice, whether brown rice or white rice or basmati, I don't know, but just eat lots of rice and lots of fruits and lots of whole grains. That's terrible nutrition advice, because although the average Indian may not become obese, they're going to start to have high blood pressure, and they're going to start to have visceral adiposity that is very, very dangerous for their long-term lifespan, but also for their health span, because all of us, we want to live to be very old, but we also want to be very healthy that entire time as well. We don't want to be in a nursing home or a care facility or be incapacitated because of a stroke or a heart attack that's given us heart failure or liver failure or kidney failure. Nobody wants that. And so the lie that you should eat lots of whole grain and that highly processed grain is very bad for you, but whole grains are very, very good for you. And actually, the truth of the matter is that whole grains are just a little bit less bad for you than highly processed grains. That they're not as bad, but they're not good either. And so that's one of the greatest mischaracterizations that doctors will pass on to their patients, is that whole grain foods are a health food. That lots of fruits in your diet is nothing but good for you. And you're well aware that the fructose amount in some fruit juices is actually higher than the fructose amount in Coca-Cola and in Pepsi and in other soft drinks. And so we start to give our very young children and even infants fruit juices at a very young age, thinking, mistakenly thinking that that's very healthy for them, right? And so we're literally setting our small children up to develop type 2 diabetes and fatty liver even before they're adults. And so I think that's probably the most devious deception that doctors tell their patients.
Yeah, I think somewhere there must have been study where they compared whole grain with refined grain, and then they found that the problems are led with whole grain, and from there the mythology began that whole grain is healthy. I mean, that's what we say, compared to what? The question has to be compared to what?
It's exactly, it's the same exact analogy as if you said, hey, I did this study between filtered cigarettes and unfiltered cigarettes, right? And we found that the unfiltered cigarettes are worse for you than filtered cigarettes. And so the take-home message that doctors got from that are filtered cigarettes are good for you. No, that's not the message you should have gotten from that research. You should have gotten the message that filtered cigarettes are a little less bad for you than unfiltered cigarettes, but that does not make them good for you or healthy for you. And I think that same exact logic applies to the whole grain argument. Yeah, whole grains are not as bad as highly processed grain with added sugar, but that does not make them a health food.
In fact, that is my argument, that how are whole grains when we compare to with eggs? How is it compared to, let us say, dairy products? So that is how, it actually goes. Let us say, when I say dairy product, I say that in India we have paneer, we have yogurt. So how do you compare? What is your blood sugar spike compared to whole grains? So that is something which remains unanswered, because that's not it's compared. So this is one lie. Which are the other lie? I'm very curious to know about this cholesterol business. Even though there is a lot of clarity now that let us say egg yolk will not raise your cholesterol, but still people are afraid. So this cholesterol has two angles. One is food will raise, whatever food contains cholesterol will raise cholesterol, and cholesterol will cause cardiovascular disorder. So what is your thought, your views on this?
So when this hypothesis first came onto the scientific scene, it was a compelling hypothesis. We were like, oh, okay, well, let's look into this. And so the way science is supposed to work is a scientist or a doctor comes up with a hypothesis, right? And they're like, okay, and then you do some observational research and you see if that kind of supports the hypothesis. And if it does, then you say, okay, now we need a controlled trial. We need some controlled research in human beings to see, does eating high cholesterol foods increase your risk of heart attack or stroke? Because at the end of the day, none of us really care if it raises our cholesterol. What we really want to know as patients, all of us, is, does this increase my risk of a heart attack? Does this increase my risk of a stroke? Does it increase my risk of dying? Those are the true endpoints that people do care about and should care about. And so anytime that we have put the cholesterol heart health hypothesis to the test and have done controlled research, we found that actually replacing high cholesterol food with vegetable oils results in worse outcomes. You have more cancer, you have more heart attacks, you have more, definitely have more strokes. And there have been controlled studies done in human beings. And I've got a YouTube video where I talk all about this. There's the Minnesota Heart study. There was a study done in Australia. And then there was a third study done where they replaced animal fats, which are very high in saturated fat. They replaced that with vegetable oils. And then they controlled this research. And one of the studies was even blinded. The participants didn't know if they were getting butter and beef tallow and lard, or if they were getting corn oil. They didn't even know. But at the end of every study, the people who were getting the vegetable oils instead of the high cholesterol animal fats had more heart attacks, way more cancer, and more strokes. And so if what people care about, what they should care about is this going to help me live longer and be healthier, or is this going to contribute to disease? the controlled research in high cholesterol foods has not supported that hypothesis. And what's supposed to happen in science is that if a hypothesis is not supported by controlled research, that hypothesis is supposed to die. It's supposed to go away. But the problem is that with this hypothesis, it has been adopted and promoted by very high profile associations like the American Heart Association. And indeed, I think the Heart Association in India also supports this hypothesis. And so when you've got these huge multi-million-dollar organizations who most people look at as the preeminent authority on health, when they're promoting these, even though the controlled research didn't support it at all, it muddies up the water of the science. And so people become thoroughly confused, including doctors and dietitians and other healthcare practitioners. They're like, well, gosh, I looked at these studies Dr. Berry talked about in his video, and they definitely don't support the high cholesterol foods equal heart disease hypothesis. But here's a printout from the Heart Association here in America or here in Australia or here in any big country, and it absolutely says we should limit the amount of cholesterol in our diet. So I'm confused. The research says it doesn't matter, but all the big authorities say, yes, you should eat a low cholesterol diet. And so it just leaves people utterly confused. And so then the advice they wind up actually taking is the advice from the big food manufacturers who put a heart healthy stamp on their box. And people are like, well, this says it's heart healthy. I guess I'll just eat this.
Yeah, so this two study, which even I read, Sydney Heart Study or Minnesota Coronary Experiment, these are either hidden or not discussed well. And they actually prove to the contrary, that the
Yes.
high level of omega-6 fatty acids are actually harmful, and all this animal fat are actually either harmless or even it can show positive trend. And if we have the recent Pure study also, which really myths everything. I mean, it blasts everything. But however, yeah, the influence of industry is quite high, and especially the food industry. So because
Yes.
they have to make a lot of money, and all this junk food actually they can process at a very low cost and sell at a high cost, and they are the one who keeps influencing all the guidelines. So we have a couple of industries, not only food, but even the other way, the pharma. One creates disease and one offers solution. So this is how.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when your doctor gives you bad nutrition advice, that's why it's so much more insidious, because we all understand that big food corporations, they're trying to make money. That's their job. That's totally fine. That's human nature. But then when your local heart specialist or your local family physician, when they back up the argument made by big food manufacturers, do you see how that adds a layer of insulation? Because we all expect, any big corporation, they're gonna bend the truth and stretch the truth to try to increase their profit margin. That's what companies do. But when they basically receive the stamp of approval from your doctor, from your heart doctor, or from your kidney doctor, then that's where it goes to the next level of deception. And that's where it becomes really, really dangerous, because the average person has a lot of respect for their doctor. They have a lot of respect for their healthcare provider. And when that healthcare provider basically repeats the lie that's being told by Kellogg's or Mondelez or any of the big food manufacturers, that makes the lie very, very believable. And the average person, they're defenseless against the team of big food, big medicine, and big pharma, and their local doctor. When all those people gang up against the patient to tell them this lie and perpetuate this lie, it becomes almost impossible for the average person who's just trying to live their life and take care of their family and have a happy, healthy life. It becomes almost impossible for them to tease out what's the truth of nutrition and what are the lies.
So there's one more big lie. Red meat causes cancer. Red meat causes CVD. Red meat is worse than smoking cigarette. So this really exists. And for years, yes, I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat red meat. I eat eggs Okay, but I want to bring out the truth, Dr. Berry. So, what is the truth about red meat?
So in order to understand the truth about meat in general, and then red meat specifically, is we have to study paleoanthropology. And over the last couple of years, I've become a very active student in paleoanthropology. And what we all need to understand is that we all are descended from the same ancestors. Now, our populations, obviously looking at you and looking at me, you can tell that we don't share many close ancestors. But when you go back far enough in time, 200,000 years, 500,000 years, you and I descended from the same direct ancestors, right? And so, although there may be differences between you and I genetically, 99.99% of you and I, we have the same DNA. We're the same mammal. We're the same species. And so, with that being said, when you look at the paleoanthropological literature, it's well known that for the last 2 to 3 million years, our direct ancestors ate as much fatty meat as they could get their hands on. Truthfully, we were considered hypercarnivores, which means that 70% of our food came from meat or animal-based foods. Only 30% came from plant-based or vegetables or fruits or whatever. Now, we've always eaten some starch. We've always eaten some veg. We've always eaten fruits. We've always eaten honey. But the majority of our diet has always come from fatty meat. And that could be red meat. That could be poultry. That could be seafood. That could be eggs. But we always ate the majority of our diet from animal-sourced foods. And so, again, about the same time that the cholesterol heart hypothesis was becoming very popular, it also was becoming very popular to say that red meat was somehow carnal. It was bad. It was dangerous. It would cause cancer. It might cause heart disease. And so that was another hypothesis, right? But so first of all, I think it was a foolish hypothesis when you realize the paleoanthropological truth of it. That would be like saying, oh, breathing air is bad for humans. Well, our direct descendants have been breathing air for 3 million years. Now you're telling me it's bad? Another line in the book I talk about is that sunlight is bad for you. It's dangerous. It'll cause skin cancer. So again, they're saying, oh, well, the sun that we've all been playing in for 3 million years, oh, it's now bad for you. You should avoid that. Well, and so, if you're I believe that if scientists are gonna form a hypothesis that something is bad for you, it should be something that's been added to our environment in the last few decades, like microplastics in our salt and in our seawater. That's a hypothesis they should look into, because I'll bet you that's really bad for humans. But they don't seem very interested in that. They seem very interested in trying to prove that these ancestral, very, very ancient things are bad for us. And so I feel that you can eat a proper human diet and never eat red meat. I think you can eat a proper human diet with lots of eggs, lots of dairy, lots of poultry, lots of seafood. I think you can eat a very healthy, proper human diet. And I think it's very possible to eat a vegetarian diet as long as you include lots of fish, lots of eggs, and lots of butter into your vegetarian diet. I think it's perfectly acceptable to eat a vegetarian diet. Now, if you're trying to eat a vegan diet, I just don't think you're going to have your best long-term health from eating a vegan diet. I think that you're missing out on far too many essential fatty acids, far too many essential amino acids. And over the years of eating a vegan diet, you are going to become deficient in a list of vitamins and a list of minerals if you don't take a handful of supplement pills every single day of your life. And it seems to me to be common sense that if what you are eating, if you think that's a proper human diet, you shouldn't have to take a handful of supplements every day in order to get all your vitamins and minerals and fatty acids and amino acids that are not in your diet. Human beings have always eaten for nutrient density. The reason we eat is to get nutrition, right? And you're never going to find a better source of nutrient-dense vitamins and minerals and amino acids and fatty acids than you're going to find in meat, in animal-based foods, whether it's seafood or whether it's red meat that has grazed pasture.
Yeah, I think, now India has one of the lowest meat consumption. That is the truth. In fact, if you refer to National Geographic, what the world eats, and specifically dial in India, you will see that the consumption of egg, it is not even one per head. I mean, it is so pathetic. I mean,
Yep.
it is, I consider egg as one of the low cost, nutrient dense food available in India. It costs
Yes.
just rupees 5, which is very easily affordable, and cheaper than a bag of chips, maybe potato chips, which cost around 10 rupees or so. But then the fear is so much that people really don't take. And yeah, in India, we do tend to suffer a lot of deficiencies, specifically B12 deficiency,
Yep.
vitamin D deficiency, and more important, iron deficiency. I mean,
Yes.
it is so rampant. And not only this, but let me tell you, even see, in India, we have what is called as vegetarians and non-vegetarians. There are two classes. So vegetarians are those who take dairy, and non-vegetarians are those who take eggs, meat, fish, and everything. But let me tell you, even the non-vegetarians, they're essentially vegetarians for most of the week. I mean, they take meat, fish, egg only maybe two times a week or 3 times a week max, and most of them are on the same whole grain and vegetable stuff.
Yes.
So it
Yeah,
is.
I think that the work you're doing is wonderful, and it's so necessary and so needed. If you and I could get every citizen of India to just eat one egg a day,
Yeah.
just one egg a day, I think that you would revolutionize health in India. I think the incidence of fatty liver you would see the curve start to go down. The incidence of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, the curve would immediately start to go down, because when you eat a nutrient-dense food that's full of amino acids and essential fatty acids, like an egg, you're not as hungry for the rest of the day. And so you're not constantly snacking all day. And yeah, that's one of my main goals for India, is I want everybody in India to eat one egg a day.
Then again, the other big issue, Dr. Berry, let me tell you, in this country, even if people eat meat, fish, eggs, they're going to cook it in vegetable oil, seed oil. It is just horrible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
when people say that, in India, if we really want to reduce the incidence of diabetes or obesity, then we should eat more of meat, fish, eggs. But let me tell you, more than that, what we need is elimination first. I think we need to eliminate this vegetable and seed oil,
Yeah. Yes.
which is just terrible. In fact, a few hours prior, we just had a podcast with Tucker Goodrich, specifically on this vegetable and seed oil. And as you say, these animal fats are more preferred. And for India, yes, the animal fat is butter and ghee. And mind you, my
Yeah.
dear countrymen, the source of butter and ghee is actually from animal. So it is animal fat for us, and which is highly accepted in the entire vegetarian class, including the Jains. We all prefer
Wonderful.
butter and ghee. And please
Yeah.
go ahead and cook with this. So that's
Yeah,
how
please.
it is.
What is the predominant vegetable oils in India? Is it soybean and canola?
See, we use quite a lot of sunflower oil, and in
Yeah.
the sunflower oil, and now, yeah, canola oil is now coming in. And we also use peanut oil. Now, peanut,
Yeah.
sesame, and mustard are said to be our traditional oil. So
Right.
earlier we were using cold press version, and nowadays we use those refined bleached deodorized version.
Gotcha.
And
And I think this is another great example where, the vegetable oil manufacturers, it's very cheap to make vegetable seed oils, right? And in many countries, definitely in the United States, they get a huge subsidy from the federal government to grow soybean oil and peanut oil and canola oil and sunflower oil. They get subsidy money, and so it's basically cheap, if not free, for the big oil manufacturers to get their raw materials to make these vegetable oils with, right? But they're very high. The omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is terrible for all of the vegetable oils that you mentioned. Peanut oil, sunflower oil has a huge omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And then you said they're now trying to push canola oil, which is also a very unhealthy, terrible oil. Not only is the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio very bad, but also these oils oxidize very readily. And every time you cook with them, a little bit is converted into trans fat, which is already known around the world to be one of the most unhealthy things you put in your mouth. But every time you cook with your sunflower oil or your peanut oil or your soybean oil, it oxidizes, right? And so you've got this oxidized omega-6 rich fatty oil in your body. You're just causing chronic inflammation all over your body. And so I'm so happy to hear that Indians love their butter and love their ghee, because both of those oils, you can cook with them at very high temperatures. They don't oxidize nearly as much as the vegetable oils do. And they're full of vitamins and minerals. People don't realize that. They think that butter and ghee is just fat. And that's not true at all. They're an incredible source of omega-3 fatty acids, and also of vitamins and minerals that you just can't find anywhere else in a vegetarian diet. So I'm gonna amend my previous statement. I'm gonna say I want every citizen of India to eat 1 egg a day cooked in ghee. That'd be a great victory. And if you've got soybean oil or sunflower oil or canola oil, please go and throw it in the garbage, because that's what it is. It's garbage.
Yeah, and yeah, we also use sesame. We also use mustard oil. Soybean oil may be used in some of those fast food joints, and most of the snack makers, they do use even palm oil, which is refined, bleached, deodorized, and you'll not believe.
And
I
don't really see a problem health-wise with palm oil or coconut oil or real avocado oil or real olive oil. I don't know about in India, but in the United States, it's almost impossible to buy unadulterated olive oil. All of it's they've added canola or something to it because those oils are cheaper. But if you can find real olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, and even palm oil, they're not nearly as bad as the sunflower oil and the corn oil and the peanut oil and other vegetable oils.
I think it's very difficult even to get a good olive oil here. I totally agree. If it is difficult for you in US, you can imagine in India where the regulations are not so tight. And I have seen pickles being made in cottonseed oil. I mean, it is just horrible. And this is something which is taken from it was used originally as a machinery oil.
That's right. It was a lubricant. And they said, hey, we can make more money if we sell this as a cooking oil. And so, and that's another example. Like if nutrition researchers, if they want to look at something, don't look at the sun. Don't look at foods that we've been eating for 2 million years. Don't look at that stuff and try to find something bad. We human beings only started eating cottonseed oil in 1910. That's when it started. That's a new thing in the human environment. You should maybe study that and form a hypothesis and then do some controlled research, because I guarantee you'll find that cottonseed oil is very unhealthy for human beings.
Highly inflammatory and very high omega-6 and totally rancid, oxidized. It is just horrible. And that's how it is. Yeah, fortunately, coconut oil, it is used in India, but only in certain parts. Maybe only in coastal India it is used. So the other parts do not use. But Dr. Berry, you must be knowing that ghee is the contribution of India to the world. So ghee.
Yes, I love ghee. I love it.
So ghee is something which has originated in India. So this is our contribution to the world.
You should be very proud of that. That is an accomplishment. I love it.
So a few other lies, like carbohydrate is necessary because it is the fuel for the brain.
Yeah. So, and this is a very common lie that many doctors and many dietitians, they believe this because they just haven't done the research. But they're not trying to be purposefully deceptive. They just don't know better yet. And again, that's why I made the title of the book so inflammatory, is maybe they would, out of anger, maybe they would read the book, and then that would help them to think about this. But it's maddening how many times doctors will give this kind of advice, and then there's absolutely no meaningful research to back it up whatsoever.
And salt is to be feared.
Yeah, salt's another great example. So again, this is an example of an ancient thing that not only all humans, but all mammals, every mammal on the planet will travel for miles to find a source of salt, right? Mammals don't do that because they're stupid or because they're a glutton or because they're, just they haven't read the research. They do it because salt is absolutely needed for proper human function, for optimal human function. You have to have a certain amount of salt, or you will not have the energy that you need. You won't have the stamina, and you can actually worsen heart disease if you're not eating enough salt. And I just made a YouTube video about this just a few days ago. This research, they said, I think salt's bad for humans, but they haven't. Every single time they do the controlled research, it shows that eating more salt's actually good for you. If you eat less than about 3 grams of salt a day, it's very, very unhealthy. It contributes to heart failure. It contributes to all kinds of bad outcomes. And in my YouTube video, I've linked probably 10 different studies in human beings of control research that shows that it's mandatory that you eat salt. And so again, they're trying to say, the sun's bad for you. Salt's bad for you. Drinking water's bad for you. Breathing air is bad for you. Eating red meat is bad for you, when we've been doing this for millions of years. It's not bad for us. Look at cottonseed oil. Look at sunflower oil. Look at things that we've only been doing for a few decades. Those are probably the things that are bad for us. We've only been adding sugar as a refined sugar to our diet since the 1500s, 1600s. Let's look at that. I bet that's bad for us. Let's not look at things that human beings have been doing for millions of years. Those things are obviously good for us, or we would not have been doing them for millions of years. The research on salt is atrocious. It's completely worthless. But every time we do controlled research on salt, it turns out salt's good for you and you actually need it.
And Dr. Berry, I recall reading quite a number of studies on PubMed, which actually shows that if we reduce salt, it will cause insulin resistance. So
yeah, absolutely, it increases your blood sugar and causes hyperinsulinemia. Absolutely true. Yeah, and I think one of the research studies I linked in my YouTube video was about that very topic. And so if you're pre-diabetic and you're trying to eat lots of whole grains and lots of fruits, and you're trying to avoid salt because your doctor told you to, then you're actually increasing your risk of becoming a type 2 diabetic. So it's disastrous advice. And that's that. Yeah. It's almost if a group of people got together and said, how can we get as many people as possible to become type 2 diabetics? What advice should we give people? And that's the current advice that we're giving people. And that's why the epidemic of type 2 diabetes continues to explode, is because we're giving all this bad nutrition advice.
I think advice after advice are just disastrous. So while your book does list a lot of other lies also, so we'll just come to your probably a new book, something which you're going to write, Proper Human Diet. So I know you have been in the last 40-45 minutes you have been telling this, but can you just just sum it up? What actually is our proper human diet? What we should
so a proper and now keep in mind, this is based on my research in human nutrition, human medicine, but then also archaeology and paleoanthropology. Most doctors and dietitians, they're not taught any paleoanthropology, but you would think that we would want to know, what have human beings eaten for 1 million years, 2 million years? We would want to know that, right? That seems important, but doctors and dietitians get no training in that whatsoever. But so when you take all 4 of those disciplines and you put them together, what you find is that a proper human diet is a spectrum. And so over on one end of the spectrum can be the vegetarian. who eats plenty of eggs and plenty of ghee and seafood, right? And they eat lots of vegetables. They don't eat too many fruits. They don't drink fruit juices. They don't drink fruit juice smoothies. Those things are not part of a proper human diet, but you can have a considerable amount of veg in your diet if it's married with lots of healthy animal fat from butter and ghee and from seafood and maybe from full fat dairy. And then the other end of the proper human diet spectrum is going to be a diet almost exclusively of animal products. And again, that can be lots of red meat. For me, it's lots of red meat, eggs, full fat fermented cheese, and then seafood as often as I can find it at the grocery, right? That's my proper human diet. So I think by design, human beings are low carbohydrate mammals. And so anytime you're eating over 100 total grams of carbohydrate a day, not eating proper human diet. So I think proper human diet is from 100 grams of total carbohydrate a day of real one ingredient vegetable sources, and a few fruits and berries here and there, but that's not a major part of your diet. But the proper human diet can also range to almost 0 grams of carbohydrates, because your liver is perfectly capable of making any glucose that your brain might need, that your gonads might need, that certain cells in your kidneys and your red blood cells, some of these need glucose, but your liver can make all the glucose your body needs. You never have to eat sugar in order to feed your brain or to feed any other body part. Your liver can make that sugar very quickly anytime your body needs it. So I think a proper human diet also consists of only real, whole, natural, one ingredient foods. So if you're about to eat a food that comes in a cardboard box or a plastic bag that has a long list of ingredients, that's not a proper human food. Right off the bat, I can tell you, if what you're about to eat was made in a factory, that's not a proper human food. Proper human food either grazes on the ground or grows in the ground. That's where proper human food comes from. So if what you're about to eat came from a factory, has a long list of ingredients, is not meat and veg, animal-based or vegetable-based, then it's not part of a proper human diet, and it is going to contribute to disease later in your life.
So yeah, so as you say, a lot of vegetables and a lot of what I will term as, I will say it is fatty protein food. So this fatty protein food could be from animal origin, or it can be from, let us say, dairy. So whether it is Indian cottage cheese, whether it is cheese, whether it is yogurt, so which we called as curd in India or dahi in India, all perfectly all right. Cheese, some maybe nuts and seeds and all perfectly all right, as long as you rightly say, to avoid
and
this cardboard.
You always want your dairy to be full fat. You never
Full
want
fat,
skim or fat free. You want it to be full fat. But human beings have never sought out low fat options in our diet. That's never been what we looked for as a species. We always look for the highest sources of fat that we could find, and that's what we ate, and that's because that's what we need.
And paradoxically, we find nowadays that all the ancestral foods are all guilty until they are proven suspicion, they are proven innocence, where all the modern processed food are all innocent until proven guilty. So it is.
And that seems backwards to me. That's backwards, right? Yeah, it should be the other way around. The ancestral foods should be innocent until proven guilty. And the foods made in factories, they should be guilty until proven innocent. But somehow we've got that upside down and backwards.
I think all these are also caused, our dietary guidelines to be grossly wrong, probably the influence of the industries.
Yes.
And in India, we just follow the Western guideline. Sorry. So whether it is dietary guideline or whether it is medical guideline, we just blindly ape the something which is coming from the Western world. So Dr. Berry, what finally is your message to India? What do you feel is, I know you had repeated this earlier, 2-3 key point. What do you think, now that we almost summed it up, some 2-3 key, 3-4 points?
So I want you to do 5 things for me so that I, as a doctor, can help improve your health. Number one, I want you to remove all sugar from your diet, definitely all the added sugar, but also I want you to minimize the naturally occurring sugars as well. Number two, I want you to get all the grains out of your diet. Wheat, rice, oats, and corn, none of those are a healthy health food for human beings. They're great to keep you from starving, and that's why I call them starvation foods or slave foods. They're very cheap to make, and they'll keep you from starving to death, but they're devoid of real nutrition. Step number three, get rid of all of the vegetable oils out of your diet. Use animal fat oils like butter and ghee, or use avocado, olive oil, palm oil even. Before, I would much prefer you use palm oil versus sunflower oil. Step number four is to stop eating any processed food that comes in a cardboard box or a plastic bag that has a long list of ingredients. Step number five, get lots of animal fat and protein in your diet. And this can be from eggs, this can be from dairy, full fat dairy, this can be from seafood, or this can be from red meat. All of those sources of fat and protein and vitamins and minerals are ancestral foods for all human beings, not just certain human beings. Every human being descended from ancestors who used to eat lots of fatty red meat. And so don't be afraid of these foods, definitely from a health standpoint. Now, if you have an ethical or religious reason, then you have to work around that. And that's totally fine. I understand that. But I think that you can do that with lots of seafood, lots of dairy, lots of eggs, lots of butter and ghee.
Fine. So thank you, Dr. Berry. It was really nice discussing with you. You could throw a lot of light on the lies as well as what is proper human diet. So I just throw open the session for any question and answer. If anyone has any questions, they can just put forward. So what I'm doing is I'm going to unmute everyone so people can just canola oil, is it best avoided? Why? So this is one question. Why should canola oil be avoided?
So if you need to watch a YouTube video about how canola oil is made. Canola oil, when it's first taken out of the rapeseed, it stinks. It's very muddy and cloudy looking. They have to use chemical detergents, chemical antioxidants. They have to use heat and pressure to get it to be that beautiful golden liquid that you see in the bottle. Canola oil is very, very high in omega-6 fatty acids, which are inflammatory. A very healthy human omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, we should never be eating more than 4-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. And the average American, and I would suspect the average Indian, usually eats a 20-to-1 or a 30-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s. Very unhealthy. Also, canola oil, when you cook with it, it oxidizes very rapidly. And now you have these oxidized fats in your body, which are also very unhealthy. And then anytime you cook with canola oil, some of it converts into trans fats, which you've heard of and that are very, very unhealthy. Canola oil is one of the least healthy cooking options and baking options on the planet. Please avoid it.
So, Rajgopalan, my answer to this is anything which is recommended by mainstream, you need to think twice. If they're pushing canola, then you should be a little suspicious. And if they say avoid butter and ghee, then again, you should be suspicious. So go for butter and ghee.
Totally agree. Totally agree. The ancestral foods are bad. These new foods that we've made in the factory are good. I think that you're right. It all comes down to the profits, the how much profit, what percentage of profit can you make? You can make a very high percentage profit on canola oil, but you can't make a very high percentage profit on butter and ghee. And therefore, they're not interested in talking about that.
And there's one question here. Ask Dr. Ken about eating high carb once in a while, once in 15 days. So what is your opinion, Doc?
I think if by once in a while, you mean once a week or once a month, I think that's probably completely fine. It's the daily ingestion of too many carbohydrates day after day after day that's going to lead to the majority of chronic health problems. But I think if you just think back in time, our ancestors, 250,000 years ago, if they found a honey tree, what do you think they did? They ate all the honey, definitely, right? When the fruits and berries, when they became ripe once a year, what do you think they did? They ate all that. Of course they did. But on a daily basis, their diet was a very low carbohydrate diet filled with animal foods, whether it was eggs or meat. That's what they ate on a daily basis. And then they would fill in with veg if they could get enough meat. But that is our ancestral diet.
So Dr. Kishan here mentioned that I think engineers and other non-doctors should start teaching new doctors. Only then these lies will be removed from future generation. So it is
Yeah,
not
I
only.
Totally agree. But I don't think that'll be happening anytime soon. I don't think the change is going to come from the top down. Never is the government going to recommend a low carb diet. Never is a big food going to recommend a low carb diet. Never are the big pharmaceutical companies going to recommend a low carb diet, because all of their profits would suffer. This is going to have to come from the ground up. It's going to come from you telling your mom, telling your brother, telling your next door neighbor, look how much healthier I am now. You need to eat this way too.
My answer to Dr. Kishan is, Dr. Kishan, so we have Dr. Berry here, who is also actually from mainstream, but due to his own personal health struggles, he has found something new and he was very open-minded. Now he's propagating. So I think each and every doctor who comes across this, they actually become what is called as a change medium. So Dr. Kishan, I also request you to also gain more knowledge so that you will be able to help your patients. So so one doctor converted means you will be able to help multiply that success with many of the patients.
Yes.
So that's how it is. And we have quite a lot number of doctors who have actually changed their viewpoint based on either personal success or seeing one of their patient gaining success. Just like we have Dr. David Unwin, who has actually changed after he saw one of his patient coming back, stopping all her diabetes meds. So that's how it is. So there's one more question here before I take up for Venkat Ramanan. Just please hold on a minute. There's a question which came in my email. So this is from a general surgeon. He has undergone bypass surgery 18 months back. He is doing intermittent fasting for last 1 year. What is your recommendation on low carb keto carnivore? So he says after undergoing bypass, can you do low carb keto carnivore?
Absolutely, you can, because that is our ancestral diet. A lot of people think, oh, well, I had my thyroid taken out. I had my gallbladder taken out. I got heart stents. I got heart bypass. I probably need to eat some weird modern diet now, right? No, you're still a human being. You still need to eat a proper human diet, regardless of what medical procedure you've had done. Your long-term health benefits are going to be better by eating real human food than from eating fake food in a cardboard box.
So I think this also addresses one of the question here. After bypass surgery, what kind of diet would you recommend, keto or carnivore, which is there? Yeah, so Dr. Berry has just addressed this. So Dr. Berry, the second leg of that question is use of statin and anticoagulant therapy in the same individual who has undergone bypass. So would you recommend statin and anticoagulant in such a patient?
Yeah, I don't really recommend statins for any human being, regardless of their medical condition. There are some low-carb doctors who would still say if you've had bypass surgery, you might benefit from taking a very low dose of a statin. But I still think that 90% of your health benefit is going to come from eating a proper human diet. And if you want to take a very low dose of a statin, and as long as you supplement with some extra coenzyme Q10, and then also watch your blood sugar very carefully, because statins can make your blood sugar go up, then it's probably not that big a deal. But I definitely would not take a high dose statin, even in your situation.
Right. So please tell him that I am a huge fan of him and regularly watch his YouTube channel. Keep up the good work. Highly appreciate and thanks. So this is what thanks a doctor as a general surgeon has passed on the thanks to you, Dr. Berry.
Absolutely. Thank you, doctor, for doing what you do.
Yeah, Dr. Kostub. He's Dr. Kostub. He's not here, but he has sent the question to me. So I'll mail back your answer to him, or probably he will see this video and do. And
Yes.
there's one more question here. What is your opinion about OMAD? One meal a day LCHF,
Yeah.
OMAD LCHF. Is it possible?
So OMAD stands for 1 meal a day. And I think it's a very ancestral pattern of eating. You can think back when we were living out as wild humans, we didn't have 3 meals a day with 3 snacks in between. That rarely was the case. And so it would be very common for us to eat once a day or even once every other day. And I typically either eat 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, just depending on our family situation and what I have going on with work. But for the majority of my days, I'll eat 1 meal a day. And so I fast for 22 or 23 hours a day. And then I have one big meal a day during which I eat as much food as I can eat. I don't limit my portion size. I don't count calories. I don't do any of that stuff. I eat until I'm comfortably stuffed. And I think that mimics how we've lived for the last 2 million years. And I think that's by mimicking what we've done forever, that's where you're going to find your best health.
So there's one more question here. What is GI index and its role? I keep on hearing about GI index is better. Is it a lie or?
What is that now?
GI, glycemic index.
Oh, the glycemic index. Yeah. I think the glycemic index is very, very important, especially if you're hyperinsulinemic, you have insulin resistance, or you're pre-diabetic, or you're a diabetic. You absolutely need to avoid all the high glycemic index foods. There's another measurement called glycemic load, but the glycemic load is based on a certain amount of that food. And so the big food manufacturers can trick you by using glycemic load, because they'll use just a very small, maybe 100-gram serving, and nobody eats just 100 grams of anything. But I think glycemic index is a very powerful thing to use. Avoid all the high glycemic index foods, and you'll notice that your blood sugars go back to very healthy levels.
So there's one question here. Does hunger indicate a sign of seeking micronutrients or calories?
Well, I don't think the human body knows what a calorie is. I think that your body is searching for 4 things. It's searching for amino acids. It's searching for fatty acids. It's searching for vitamins, and it's searching for minerals, because those 4 things make up your entire body. That is what you are made of. There is no body part that counts calories, or that looks for calories, or that seeks out calories. Calories is a modern invention. Calories are very important in physics. They're very important if you're working on an air conditioning unit or a heating unit. But when it comes to human health, your body doesn't know what a calorie is, and you should not waste your time counting them.
So I think probably what the question meant, calories is energy. So whether the body seeks energy, whether it seeks micronutrients. But as you had just addressed, yeah, it does seek micronutrients.
Sure, and energy as well. But I think the body is much more interested in energy in the form of fat than it is energy in the form of carbohydrates.
Yeah. So given that you are a medical doctor, what would it take to change the information included in medical books? So this is a question. How do we change the information in medical book?
Well, I don't think that's where we start. I don't think we can start with the National Diabetes Associations, because I think that they've received far too many donations from big food and big pharma. I don't think they're interested in changing the medical textbooks. And that's why I said earlier, this change has got to come one person at a time. Each time we wake a doctor up and they start to recommend a low-carb diet, they help hundreds of other people in the way of helping their patients. That's how we're going to change the world. We're going to change the world by people teaching their mom and dad, teaching their sons and daughters, and teaching their neighbors and friends. That's how we're going to change the world, not from changing the guidelines and changing textbooks. That'll be the very last thing to change.
And I think medical profession is little slow in changing. We have seen in many cases.
Very slow.
Very simple, like even washing of hands.
To be honest with you, to be honest with you, I'm not even interested in changing the guidelines or changing the textbooks. My goal is to teach every person on the planet who eats food how to eat food and what a proper human diet is. Because what's going to happen is eventually we're all going to be sitting back laughing at the diabetes associations and the textbooks and the doctors who still don't know better. they'll give us their advice and we're just going to laugh at them. We're like, no, I'm not going to do that.
I think just like we all are laughing.
Yep.
Yeah. There's one question here. As a vegetarian, I do not eat eggs. So what is a good source of protein?
I mean, is there some religious belief in not eating
See,
eggs?
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, in India, vegetarians do not eat eggs.
Okay.
So that's how it is. So see, we are
Yeah,
not
well,
vegans. We take dairy. So
okay, and I think you can do this without eating
yeah.
eggs. Is it okay to eat seafood and fish and full fat dairy? None of that, huh?
Yeah. Dairy,
Wow,
yes.
yeah.
Dairy, yes. See, Dr. Berry, in India, vegetarians eat dairy.
Okay. So I guess you're just going to have to eat a lot of high fat, full fat dairy. You can probably meet most of your fatty acid, vitamin, and mineral needs that way. You may still have to take some supplementation if you just can't figure out a way to eat seafood or eggs.
Not possible. So Subhadra, just to address, let me address this. The option is dairy. The option is Indian cottage cheese paneer. The option is cheese. The option is curd or yogurt, or that water drained, whey drained yogurt is something we need to have. And maybe just depend upon some nuts. And at the most, if someone cannot make up that, then I don't mind recommending whey protein. Because that is some way where you can get protein. So being a vegetarian, we are stuck with dairy. So go ahead, and we need to plan and see that how we make dairy our prime source of protein. For there's a question from here, one more individual. Non-sugar person, that means a non-diabetic, should we also follow GI index? Should they also avoid high GI food? So this is a question.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you have insulin resistance, if you're pre-diabetic, or if you're a diabetic type 1 or type 2, you need to avoid all the high glycemic index foods, because not only will they spike your blood sugar, but all of the high glycemic index foods are nutrient void. They have very little in the way of meaningful nutrition, even though they're promoted to you as very healthy. There's no nutrition in them. So why would you want to spike your blood sugar with the food that really doesn't have any meaningful nutrition at all? That's a bad plan.
So it is this high GI foods which we keep taking commonly is going to cause any issue. So someone was asking, what is your opinion about whey protein?
I was asking, sorry to interrupt. I was asking, like, even for non-diabetic, we should avoid high GI index food, is it?
Yeah, that's what Dr. Berry has just addressed. You need to avoid that.
Yeah, okay. Even if you're a non-diabetic, that's how you're going to become a pre-diabetic or a type 2 diabetic, is by eating too many high glycemic index foods too often. And so, yeah, if you're very young and metabolically healthy, you can probably get away with eating high GI foods, but that's not going to last forever. Eventually, you're going to be in your 30s and 40s or 50s, and you're going to become pre-diabetic if you eat high GI foods too often. And then now the whey protein. I personally, if you can eat seafood or lots of dairy or eggs or some kind of meat, I think that whey protein is completely unnecessary. I think it's a complete waste of money. But if you're limiting your foods due to ethical or religious reasons, then there may be a place for whey protein just to get all the amino acids that you need for optimal function.
Yeah, and one answer to Venkatramanan. In fact, there was a recent study which I had posted on Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram, these high GI foods, the constant spikes are also related to cardiovascular disease. So while you may not get diabetes, you may suffer from some cardiovascular issue. This frequent spike in blood sugar is going to cause damage to your blood vessel and leading to atherosclerosis and other cardiovascular disorders. So it is just
absolutely. And someone asked about, do I have any YouTube videos about eating too much fruit and why it's bad? Yes, I have several. And the reason I make all my YouTube videos is just to help regular people understand what is a proper human diet, but also to help low-carb doctors, because very often when one doctor says something, the patient's like, what? I can't believe that's true. I've been told the opposite my whole life. And so many doctors and dietitians and other healthcare providers will share my YouTube videos and say, hey, well, go watch this doctor research in the show notes. Same goes for the fruits. If you think that eating lots of fruit every single day is very good for you, I've got several YouTube videos with the research down in the show notes, because I don't ever want you to blindly believe any doctor, including me. I want you to always do your own research. That's why I put the research links in the show notes. So yeah, eating too many fruits are very high on the GI index. They're going to spike your blood sugar, but they're also very rich in fructose, which is metabolized a completely different way than glucose. And it's going to lead to fatty liver, and it's going to lead to prediabetes or diabetes if you eat too much fruit too often.
Okay, thank you.
And one question on how about tofu?
Yeah, tofu is a great starvation food. If you're starving to death, you can eat some tofu. But if your goal is to have optimal health and optimal function and a normal HbA1c and normal levels of inflammation in your body, I would avoid any soybean product. Now, I think if the tofu is fermented just right, you may make it non-inflammatory enough that if you just love it, love the taste, you can eat it occasionally. But I would avoid tofu. I would much prefer to eat more ancestral foods. And when I say ancestral foods, I'm not talking about a food that we've eaten for the last 100 years or the last 1,000 years. I'm talking about foods we've eaten for the last 2 million years. And tofu's only been around for a couple thousand years. That doesn't make it an ancestral food.
And regarding video on fruits, yes, Dr. Berry has just mentioned. So he does have a video on fruits. So regarding fruits, there is one favorite sentence which I always have and which I tell everyone. So modern fruits are pesticide laden, chemically ripened, and hybridized to be high in sugar. So I think it is better to avoid fruits.
Yeah, have them as an occasional treat. They're not a daily food.
And if you really see in the past, we used to have fruits which were grown locally, but nowadays we get dragon fruit from China, we get kiwi fruit from Kiwi land. You know, it's available, everything is available for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So humans are not meant to consume so much. So as Dr. Berry says, once in a while, yeah, go ahead and have. That is if you are metabolically okay. Just make it sure that, you know, it is what is called as organic and doesn't have too much pesticides or anything.
Yes.
And there's a question here. How about nuts? Can we have nuts?
Yeah, I think nuts are much less bad than many other snacks and foods that you can have. And nuts are seemingly very high in omega-3 fatty acids. But here's the problem. Nuts are rich in ALA, alpha linoleic acid, but they do not contain any DHA or EPA, which are actually the two omega-3 fatty acids that your body needs and wants. Some of us can convert the ALA to DHA fairly well, but many people are very poor converters of the omega-3 fats in nuts into the omega-3 fats that your body actually needs. And again, that goes back to not eating animal source foods. There are people on this planet, including Indians, who cannot convert enough ALA into DHA and EPA. Yeah, I don't care how many nuts you eat, how many omega-3 rich vegetables you eat, you're never going to be able to convert enough of that into DHA and EPA. And that's one of the supplements that I recommend every vegan and some vegetarians take is a DHA supplement, because your body cannot convert ALA to DHA in many cases.
Fine. So with one more, what blood tests are a must for everyone above 40 years?
Yeah. So if you're over 40, even if you're in the picture of health, you're just healthy and robust, starting at about age 40, you absolutely need a complete metabolic panel once a year to look at your kidney and liver function, and also to look at your electrolytes. You need a complete blood count with differential to make sure there's no signs of anemia or blood or bone disorders. You need a urinalysis at least once a year to look at the kidney function and also an indirect look at your electrolytes and other organ function. You need a hemoglobin A1C at least once a year to make sure that you're not becoming a pre-diabetic or a type 2 diabetic. You also need a C peptide or a fasting insulin once a year to make sure that you're not becoming insulin resistant or hyperinsulinemic. Now, there's hundreds and hundreds of other tests that you might need after the age of 40, but those are mandatory. You need those checked once a year, whether you feel great or not. Now, if you have other symptoms or other problems or other diagnoses, then there are other lab tests that you definitely need. But even for the healthiest of 40-year-olds, that's the minimum amount of lab work that should be checked once a year.
And personally, like, even this lipid panel test is important, but not for cholesterol.
Yep.
Not for cholesterol, but
yeah, I
to
left
see
that
the
out. You definitely need I
to see
forgot
the
that one.
triglyceride.
Lipid panel, because I want to know, do you have high triglycerides or do you have low HDL? Yeah, I definitely, include the lipid panel in there as well.
Very, very important for Indians because there's a marker of insulin resistance. TG upon HDL ratio is just one of the very, very early markers for Indians.
Yep.
So
absolutely,
you need not bother about total cholesterol, but the triglyceride will immediately indicate that you are filling your fat storage and you're going to approach diabetes very shortly, or probably if you don't get diabetes, then it's cardiovascular issue. So either one of them, just approaching. So something about peanuts. You think peanuts are okay?
Yeah, I avoid peanuts. I don't know how they're grown. I don't know if you get most of your peanuts from India or China, but here in the U.S., they're grown and they're almost always contaminated with molds because people don't know where peanuts come from. They're actually, originally they were called goober peas, and they grow under the ground. They don't grow on trees. A lot of people don't know that for some reason, but they are not a true nut. They are a legume, like a pea or a bean, but they grow under the ground. So they're very susceptible to mold toxins, number one. Number two, they have a very high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Again, that's inflammatory and harmful. And they're also a good starvation food. If you're starving, eat lots of peanuts. They'll keep you from starving to death. But if you're trying to optimize your health, peanuts are fairly nutrient void. They don't really have any meaningful nutrition, and they'll lead to inflammation, and quite often you'll get mold toxicity symptoms if you eat too many peanuts.
And thank you. So I think that's about it. So thanks, Dr. Berry. Thanks for coming in DLife platform. You have spent 1.5 hours with us, sharing your knowledge and addressing the questions.
Hey, anytime you need me, I'm always here for you, brother. I love the work that you're doing there. Every Indian needs to eat 1 egg cooked in ghee every day, and then we'll go from there. I would consider that a great victory. And
for all the Indians, for those who are just dead against egg, I will just say that please add some paneer. Paneer, Dr. Berry, is our Indian cottage cheese, full fat. Just replace a part of your grains with some paneer, with some cheese, and with some additional curds. And let me tell you that you will gain tremendous health. So thank you, Doctor. Aup Singh, would you like to say something?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Berry. Thank you for
sharing.
So thanks, Dr. Berry.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm here anytime you need me.
Thank you.